Good afternoon, everyone. If you could take a seat, we will get started with our hearing for the afternoon. We still have a couple of members that are coming, but we are going to get started.
Benson's here.
Use your gavel. Use your gavel. Call it your order.
Come on, girl. Benson's here. She's right back.
Okay. Okay, our analyst for today is the one and only Sarah Baker. And then we have Dr. Perman, the Chancellor of the University System of Maryland, Brad Phillips, Executive Director of Maryland Association of Community Colleges.
No.
No?
Yeah, that was for yesterday.
Are you kidding?
Sorry.
Okay,
They signed it wrong.
yesterday was a confusing day.
Okay, I'm going to.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, start on Exhibit 2 on page 7, which shows a change in fall undergraduate enrollment between fall 23 and 24. Overall, enrollment grew 1.6%. However, when excluding Global Campus, enrollment grew 0.9%. 7 institutions saw enrollment increases, with UMES experienced the highest rate of growth of 10.5%. At 253, Towson had the largest decrease in the number of students. After 6 years of increase, the number of first-time students declined by 79 when you exclude Global Campus. Exhibit 3 on page 8 shows if the enrollment has returned to pre-pandemic levels using the fall 2019 as a baseline for comparison. When including GC, enrollment is slightly below the pre-pandemic level by 669 students. However, when excluding GC, enrollment is down by almost 67,000 students, with 3 institutions, Towson, Salisbury, and Frostburg, accounting for 80% of this decline. And this mirrors national trends at other regional institutions and leads to concerns about the financial impact this has on the institutions as they find ways to cover loss of tuition revenue and auxiliary revenues. Exhibit 4 on page 9 breaks down undergraduate enrollment by status. And despite a slight decline in fall 24, the number of first-time students exceeds the pre-pandemic level by over 1,700 students. While the number of continuing students increased to almost 69,000, it is below the pre-pandemic level of over 98,000 students. Exhibit 5 on page 10 shows the diversity of the undergraduate student body. And overall, since fall 2019, underrepresented minorities have comprised an increasing portion of the student body, comprising 41% in fall 24, while the white students went from comprising 42% to 33%. And this follows a national trend in which enrollment of white students has been declining for the last 10 years. From 2012 to 2022, in Maryland, while enrollment across all segments of higher education decreased by 13.8%, enrollment of white students fell by 31.1%. As shown on Exhibit 6 on page 11, nationally, at the 4-year public institutions between fall 22 and 24, only enrollment of the white students has declined. Exhibit 7 on page 12 compares the retention rate of the cohort before the pandemic hit and the 24 cohort. In general, the retention rate of the 24 cohort is below that of the 2019 cohort by 1 or 2 percentage points, except for Coppin, where the rate is 9 percentage points lower than the 2019 cohort. Exhibit 8 on page 13 shows a 3rd-year retention rate. And overall, the rates for 22 and 23 has been a mixed bag, with some rates improving at some institutions and declining at others. The rates for the 23 cohort are 2 to 7 percentage points lower than the 2019 cohort. Turning to graduation rates on page 14, Exhibit 9 compares the 6-year graduation rates of the 2014 and 2019 cohorts. Overall, USM attained its highest rate of 61% with the 2014 cohort, which was one of the last to graduate before the pandemic. The rate has since fallen to 59% with the 2019 cohort, which can be attributed to the pandemic, in which fewer students enrolled or came back to campus. And this impact can be seen on the undergraduate degree production, as shown on Exhibit 10 on page 15. After increasing to the highest number of degrees in 22, the number of degrees has decreased by 4.9% in 24. Now, if you exclude Global Campus, since 2020, the number of undergraduate degrees awarded has declined to 18,619, which is the fewest awarded since 2012. Exhibit 11 on page 16 breaks down degrees by STEM, health professions, and other degrees. The goal of USM's strategic plan is to increase the number of STEM degrees by at least 10,000 and health professions by 2,500. While the number of STEM degrees has increased to 9,524, health profession degrees have fallen 15% to over 2,100. A key factor in improving student success is access to financial aid. Now, students can face various financial challenges from how to pay for school to covering food and rent, and these stresses can affect their ability to concentrate on their coursework and lead them to stopping or dropping out. Exhibit 12 on page 18 shows total expenditures on institutional aid. And you'll notice the spending on need-based aid has significantly increased by a total of $38.5 million in 23 and 24. Students who receive aid are most likely to succeed, and Exhibit 13 on page 19 shows a 6-year graduation rate of first-time and community college students who received aid and did not receive aid. Overall, as you see, those who receive aid graduate at a higher rate. Moving on to Exhibit 14 on page 20 in research expenditures. Overall, from 2019 to 23, total expenditures across all institutions increased by $669.6 million, with College Park and UMB accounting for $288 million of the increase. Just note that in 2019, College Park and UMB began reporting as one research unit, and as such were ranked 14th in 2023. Turning to the budget on page 21, Exhibit 15 shows the allocation of last July's BPW cost containment actions, which resulted in an overall $23.9 million reduction of USM's appropriation. The institutions met their reductions through hiring freezes, reducing spending on contractual service, travel, and facility renewal. Exhibit 16 on 22 shows one-time funding added during the last session that totals $7.2 million. Just to note that the Rural Health Scholarship and the Dental Emergency Clinic at UMB continue to receive funding in the allowance. Exhibit 17 on 24 shows the proposed budget. So state funds decreased 4.9% or $105.5 million when excluding the impact of the 25 general salary increases in 26, which are not included in the 25 working appropriation. Exhibit 18 on page 26 illustrates the various puts and takes to the allowance, with the largest being $111.1 million or 5% reduction to USM's appropriation. $5.2 million is related to the removal of the one-time legislative ads, and there is a $1.2 million reduction to Bowie's allocation of the HBCU settlement funds. Now, the allowance does include $5.5 million to fund mandates and $1.3 million for 2 initiatives, $1 million for Coppin to develop program plans for 6 capital projects, and $250,000 of state matching funds for UMES's agricultural extension program. In addition, there's $3.8 million to fund operating costs for new buildings and $1.7 million for equipment debt service. We asked the Chancellor to comment on actions institutions will take to reduce their budget in order to offset the reduction in state funding. On page 19, Exhibit 19 on page 28 shows state funding per full-time equivalent students. And as you see in 23, there was a jump in funding, and this is related to a variety of factors, including general salary increases, restoration of the 2021 BPW reductions, and the first year that the HBCUs received their settlement funds. While Coppin has the highest level of funding due to continuing enrollment declines, and just note in 24, the funding per FTEF slightly declines by $254 due to an increase in enrollment. University of Baltimore has the next highest funding level, reflecting the continuing decline in their enrollment. The first issue, the revised tuition policy, starts on page 30. In setting tuition rates, the Chancellor, in consultation with the regents and the presidents, will establish guidelines from which presidents will recommend tuition rates. This allows presidents to determine an appropriate tuition increase for their institutions rather than implementing a system-wide increase for in-state tuition. The policy also includes a process and criteria for institutions to implement tuition differential, which in prior years they needed to seek an exemption from the Board of Regents. This differential applies to undergraduate academic programs, programs delivered in different modalities, federal, military, and private contracts, and geographical area. So institutions implementing differential tuition must submit reports to the Board of Regents, which documents the impact of the differential. And is listed on page 31. The report needs to include baseline data, outcomes, and any negative outcomes or unexpected changes or adjustments. The second issue, the prison education program, starts on page 32. And as you recall that incarcerated individuals are now eligible for Pell Grants. USM has been in discussion with various higher education segments and Department of Corrections regarding participation and partnerships to offer program in prisons. USM hired consultants who helped develop a statewide plan, which is expanded to include any institution offering a program in prison. The findings of the consultant are listed on the bottom of the page and onto the next, and include that there is a demand for higher education programs in prisons. The approval and startup process is a significant barrier to starting programs, and data tracking and sharing is the most important support a statewide system can provide. So last year, Department of Corrections and USM entered into an MOU that established a framework for implementing programs in every state correctional facility. So Maryland is the first correctional division in the country to have a formalized MOU with a state university system. The MOU streamlines the approval process, and institutions will sign a university agreement with the department as an addendum to the MOU. Furthermore, the proposed programs will be in accordance with the goals of the MOU, and these are listed towards the bottom of the page. On page 34 and 35 is a listing of current program offerings, and on page 36 is the recommendation to concur with the governor's allowance. And that concludes my presentation.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Dr. Perman, would you like to come up to the table?
I think I should.
Sure. You can bring along with you, no, we're doing Brett
Please.
Phillips today? No, okay. Come up to the table and bring your team. We had a little bit of confusion between yesterday and today, but I think we have the right people here today.
Chair King, Senators, as always, thank you for the chance to testify in support of the governor's budget proposal for the USM. And I, too, want to thank our colleague Sarah Baker for her typically excellent work. She understands us. With me today, of course, Linda Gooden, Chair of our Board of Regents, and I'm joined as well by Senior Vice Chancellor Ellen Herbst and Allison Wren. If I may, Chair King, I'm very pleased to have the people who are always backing me up, a number of our great presidents, and I'd like to recognize them. President Mark Ginsburg of Towson, President Aminta Bro of Bowie State, our newest president, President Fernando Morales-Wilhelm, who leads UMCES.
Okay.
Of course, our president of UMES, Heidi Anderson. Let me make sure I don't ignore President Lynn LaPrey of Salisbury University and President Greg Fowler of UMGC.
Great.
Thank you, and thank you all. As I enter my 6th year as chancellor, time flies. I'm deeply proud of the system's role in driving Maryland's growth. I'm proud of the excellence our universities have achieved with your generous investment. What that investment has enabled is nothing less than our foundational mission, which is to put a college education within reach of every Marylander who wants one. That's why I took this job, and I'm passionate about that, as are my colleagues. I understand the governor's position that a 4-year degree isn't required for a successful life. I agree. And I certainly support programs that put success into the hands of those who choose a different path. But we focused for years on K-12 preparation and college affordability because we believe that our purpose is to build a system of higher education that's accessible to all who choose college, for whatever reason they choose it. And that's what we're doing. 20 years ago, Maryland's public universities were among the most expensive in the nation for in-state undergraduates. Today, 26 states are more expensive than Maryland. That's the impact of your support. For students who still need financial help, in our system, 27,000 last year, our universities awarded $101 million in aid. That's in addition to federal and state aid. And it's a pool of money that has nearly doubled over the last 10 years. So it's hardly surprising that last year, 59% of our undergraduates earned their degree without accruing any student loan debt.
Can I just add something there? You know, we all have our scholarships that we hand out every year, and when I first started handing out, I would give like $500 or $1,000 to a student, and they would be thrilled with it. But that doesn't happen anymore. Even giving so many of our kids $1,000, it doesn't give them enough money to even go to the community college. So I've kind of changed the way I give out scholarships and give out like full scholarships to the community college to way less kids, but it's a more of a guarantee that they will go for 4 years because they don't have that worry as far as money goes. So it's less kids, but they can be successful.
Well, I think that, if I may comment, I think that's a superb strategy to attract people who will otherwise not go. But I also want to reinforce the idea that you said at the outset. Every little bit helps, and it makes a difference to them. We have data to show that small awards often get somebody to stay in school that might have dropped out. So those small pieces are maybe even more important for retention than the recruitment. So in terms of affordability, I think that does explain in part a second straight year of climbing enrollment. We had a near record number this fall of full-time freshmen, growth among our transfer students, certainly growth among our graduate students, which we consider very important. This country must increase its output of doctorally prepared students, or we surely will lose the battle to China. And taken together, we've had growth at our HBCUs, which we are very excited about. So, of course, Maryland faces a serious deficit, and we understand the challenges guiding budgetary decisions. We understand that we're not alone in making tough choices and that we must do our part in restoring Maryland to fiscal health, which leads me to the question posed by our analysts. I've been asked to comment on actions our universities will take to reduce their operating budgets, offsetting the reduction in state funding. I must say plainly that the nearly 5% cut we're sustaining will be difficult for our universities, for the faculty and staff they employ, and for the students they educate. We're in the business of serving people, and there's very little we can cut that won't have a real and significant impact on them. I should point out that cutting costs is not anything new to us. Over 22 years, our effectiveness and efficiency efforts have netted $1.6 billion in cost avoidance, cost savings, and revenue generation. And while we are honored that these savings are returned to Maryland taxpayers, the point I want to make is that precisely because of these efforts, we're already lean. we've already made the cuts that you might call painless. So we have difficult decisions ahead. The cut will have three main impacts. The first is workforce impact. Most of our operating budget is spent on people, spent on personnel. And so personnel must be a large part of our response. Workforce actions will absorb 40% of the cut, $45 million. And we estimate those actions will affect about 400 positions. That's a combination of eliminating vacant positions and reducing filled positions, many of them contingent or part-time. And of course, there are consequences. We fear that unfilled faculty positions will grow our faculty-to-student ratios and impair students' abilities to graduate on time. And because we're responsible for so much of Maryland's workforce, we're concerned about the impact of our reduced capacity on the state's most urgent workforce needs: STEM, healthcare, teaching. Many of our universities will have to eliminate student-facing positions in advising, counseling, mental health services, career services, academic support. A great number of our students rely heavily on these services to get them through school and to a degree, especially our first-gen and low-income students. So we're concerned about seeing a rise in their dropout rate.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
This is not the only bad year we've got coming up, you know as well as I do, as far as
Yes.
budget goes.
Yes, and we're anxious
And
about that.
we don't, yeah, I'm anxious about it, because we don't want to make our cuts this year and then not have anything left to cut next year. So that's got to be a real balancing act to try and figure that out. But know that we're working with you.
And we know that, and we appreciate it. So personnel one, next category, operating impact. We'll intensify our efficiency efforts and cut costs on things like contractual services, supplies, fixed charges, travel expenses. We expect operating cuts and efficiencies to cover 50% of our reduction, $55 million. Finally, there's facilities impact. We'll have to reduce deferred maintenance to absorb the remaining 10% of our cut to get that additional $11 million. Of course, this reduction is going to add to the deferred maintenance backlog and potentially increase future costs as our campus buildings age. I know you're all familiar with this. Many of our universities are already challenged by critical building systems, the HVAC, electrical, sewer. They worry about facility safety and therefore student safety, disruptions to student learning, failing systems on the very operating costs they're trying to cut. While all of our universities will have to make difficult decisions, our HBCUs, they worry that cuts to student services and fundraising and marketing will stall the progress they've made under the HBCU settlement, intended, of course, to achieve funding equity. Through all of this, I assure you, our number one priority is to protect our people. That means holding as a last resort any action that's going to harm them. For our employees, this means that we'll exhaust every personnel action we can before reducing our existing workforce. For our students, it means we'll continue to prioritize affordability and consider tuition increases only if our aggressive cost-cutting measures fall short. Implementing these cuts, as I've said, won't be easy. They won't be painless. But as I said also, we're committed to doing our part as the state works toward this multi-year challenge.
Can I stop you for 1 second? Senator Quarterman.
Following up more on that, sure. You mentioned that obviously personnel is going to be one of the biggest expenses in looking at vacancies, but what are we looking at as far as current professors, unfortunately? I mean, are you at a position there where you would guesstimate on what we may lose across the system as people that are already there? I know that you're trying to balance that, and that is not what we want to see, but is there anything to comment on that?
We have no plans at this time in that direction.
Okay, good.
Again, these are last resort sort of
Understood.
things.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And thank you, Senator, because senators, I'm done.
Any other questions? Okay, how about the other members of your panel? Did anybody have anything they want to add?
Madam Chair? Did I tell the truth?
The chancellor's always honest, and as he said, no cuts are easy, but we are looking at how we can moderate them with efficiencies. And having said that, we're going to do whatever it takes to meet the budget, as we always have. So thank you for listening.
Well, I think all of us are as worried as you are about what the future looks like. You know, I wish I had that crystal ball that we could look into, and I hate to take a whole bunch of cuts this year and then next year get really desperate because we don't have anything left to cut. So, like I said, we're going to get through this together, and we'll make it work.
Thank you, Chair King.
Thank you. And happy Friday afternoon. Okay, so we have a few witnesses here. Krista Bully. Is she the only one? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Krista Bully, and I work for the USM at the University of Maryland Global Campus as a Program Administrative Specialist. I am here on behalf of my union, ASME Maryland, representing over 6,000 higher education workers to give our views as workers on the system. We are proud of our first master contract with the USM and its affiliates. After 2 years of negotiations, we finally ratified our agreement last summer. It could not have happened without the support of the General Assembly and the enabling legislation that you passed. Thank you. We have begun meeting regularly with the system office for the first time in our history. These initial meetings with the Chancellor and Ellen Erbst have been positive, and we hope will bear fruit. However, at the institution level, we do continue to have obstacles and compliance issues with our agreement. That said, our new agreement won some key victories for workers, including allowing contingent and contractual staff to finally convert to full-time status with benefits, as well as modest wage increases for our membership. We asked the General Assembly to ensure that our wage increases are fully funded so that frontline staff can continue to operate the system. Our membership, like other state employees, are stretched thin. We are doing more with less, whether there be at Frostburg, UMES, or other campuses. We ask that you work with us to find cost savings that don't impact personnel or staff. We also ask you to support the governor's revenues plan, as well as the revenue options the Fair Funding Coalition is bringing forward. A better budget from Maryland ensures that all who can pay their fair share. And it means that we stop privatizing state functions like dining, housekeeping, grounds, transportation, or maintenance across multiple campuses. Lastly, we believe outside anti-union counsel costing millions of dollars should be eliminated. We thank you for your support and stand ready to work with you to improve the USM. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that was planning to speak today? Don't see anyone. Okay, have a nice Friday afternoon.